My boss fired me on a Thursday morning in 11 minutes, and the last thing he said to me was that if I did not like it, I should get a lawyer. He said it kindly. That is the part nobody believes. He was not shouting. He said it the way you would tell somebody the time, and then he stood up, because the 11 minutes were finished, and there was somebody else in his calendar at 10. My name is Tess. I am 27 years old. I place people in jobs for a living, which is a fact you should hold on to. And 3 weeks before that Thursday, I had made the biggest placement of my entire career, and the commission on it was worth more than a year of my rent. I never saw a penny of it. Now I need you to stay with me the whole way through this, because I have to tell you something at the start. I spent 3 months trying to work out why he fired me, and every answer I came up with was wrong. All of them. I damaged a friendship over one of them. And at the very bottom of it, in a week I do not talk about, I decided that the reason he fired me was that I was bad at my job, and that everybody had been too polite to say so, and that every good thing anybody had ever told me about my work had been a kindness. By the end of this, you will know exactly why I was fired. And I promise you it had nothing to do with me. Nothing. Not my performance, not my placement, not my face, not one single thing I ever did in that building. That is not me being modest. That is the actual answer, and it is so much worse than the one I was looking for. But hold on to one thing as we begin. 11 minutes. And in 11 minutes, my boss never asked me a single question. Not one, not why, not how, not what happened, not do you have anything to say. And I sat in my car afterward, and I could not work out why that felt so strange, and it took me 3 months to understand that it was the only real clue I ever got. Let me tell you what I actually do, because it matters twice in this story, and both times it matters more than anybody expected. I am a recruitment consultant. I find people jobs, and what that actually means day to day is that I read work histories. That is the job. Everybody thinks the job is phone calls, and there are phone calls, but the real work is that I sit down with a CV, and in about 15 seconds, I know things about a person that they do not know I know. You learn to read them like a face. A 2-year gap is not a gap, it is a story, and the story is usually a person or an illness. 3 jobs in 4 years is not disloyalty, it is somebody who keeps getting hired by the wrong sort of place. A person who stayed 11 years and then left is a person something happened to. I have read maybe 40,000 of them. I am very fast, and I am very good, and it is not a respected skill. Nobody has ever asked me about it at a party. If I tell somebody at a wedding what I do, they say, "Oh right," and look over my shoulder. Because recruitment is one of those words that makes people think of a person in a cheap suit ringing you at your desk. Remember that. Nobody thinks it is a skill. I worked for a man called Craig. He owns the firm. There are about 14 of us, or there were, in a building over a carpet showroom. And Craig has one of those personalities that fills a room in a way you cannot object to. He remembers your mum's name. He buys drinks. When my grandmother died, he told me to take the week and not think about it. And he meant it, and I cried in the car park about how kind he was. I need you to understand that I liked him. Everybody liked him. That is not a mistake I made, that was the point. And I want to say something about that office, because it was not a bad place. That is the thing I cannot get across to people who have not worked somewhere like it. It was fun. We were mostly young, and we were mostly broke, and there was a whiteboard with everybody's numbers on it, and Craig would ring an actual bell when somebody landed one. An actual bell, and it was stupid and I loved it. And when the bell went for my big one in February, the whole floor stood up. The whole floor stood up. I have that in my head like a photograph. 14 people on their feet in a room over a carpet showroom. And Craig came out of his office, clapping with his hands over his head, and he hugged me, and he said my name to the room. 5 weeks later, he had a letter printed on a Tuesday. I have thought about that hug more than I have thought about the firing. Because on the day he clapped for me over my head, that letter was 6 weeks away, and he already knew the date. He knew when he hugged me. There is no version of the arithmetic where he did not know when he hugged me. And in the February, I made the biggest placement of my life. I am not going to bore you with the details, but I am going to tell you what it cost, because the cost is the story. 9 months. It was a 9-month piece of work, and it was mine from the first phone call. The candidate was a man who was not looking, which is the hardest kind, because a person who is not looking does not owe you anything and will not return your calls. I worked that man for 7 months. I learned his industry. I learned what he actually wanted, which was not what he said he wanted, because it never is. I rang him on a Sunday in October because I had a feeling, and the feeling was right. And I did it at night, mostly, because the day belongs to whoever is shouting. And I did it alone, because it was mine, and I did not want anybody's help. And I was 26, and I wanted somebody to see. I missed my best friend's engagement party for that placement. I want to put that down out loud because I have not said it since. I missed it, and I lied about why, and she has never known, and I sat in an office over a carpet showroom at 9:30 on a Friday night, on the phone, to a man in another time zone, about a job he had not applied for. The fee on it was the biggest single fee that firm had done in about 4 years. My cut was going to be about 40,000. 40,000. I had never had 40,000. I had about 11 weeks of savings and a car with something wrong with the clutch. I had run the numbers on that money so many times that I could tell you what I was going to do with it in about 6 different orders. Commission at our place gets paid quarterly, in arrears, which means you do the work in 1 quarter and you get paid in the next. And there is a line in the contract, and I knew the line was there. Everybody knows the line is there. And it says that you have to be employed by the company on the date the commission is paid, in order to receive it. That payment date was the 15th of April. He fired me on the 21st of March. Now, the 11 minutes. He put a meeting in my calendar at 9:30 on a Thursday, and he called it a catch-up, and I want you to know that I walked into that room completely relaxed. I had a coffee with me. I was in a good mood. I had just booked a holiday, which I have thought about a lot since, because I had booked it with money that did not exist yet. And he told me it was not working out, and that was it. That was the whole reason. I asked him what was not working out, and he said that he did not think the fit was right, and I asked him what that meant, and he said that these things happen, and that he did not want to make it into something it was not. I want you to notice that sentence, because it took me months to see what it does. He did not want to make it into something it was not. That is a sentence that sounds like kindness. It sounds like a man being gentle, not wanting to list your failures, sparing you. It is not kindness. It is a door closing, because if he will not say what it is, then there is nothing for me to answer. You cannot defend yourself against a fit. There is no evidence you can bring to a fit. I sat there with a coffee in my hand, and I actually felt grateful to him for a second. Grateful, because he was being so decent about not humiliating me, and it took me 3 months to understand that there was nothing to humiliate me with, and that was the whole reason he was so kind. Vagueness is not mercy. Vagueness is what you use when there is no reason. And I want every woman listening to write that down, because you will be handed a fit at some point and you will thank the person for it. There was a letter on the desk. It was already printed. It was face down when I walked in, and he turned it over and slid it across, and I looked at it, and my final payslip figure was on it, calculated, to the penny, including my outstanding holiday, which is a thing that takes payroll 2 days. And then I said the word commission, and Craig looked at me with genuine actual sympathy on his face. He said he knew, and that it was rotten timing, and that he was genuinely sorry about it. And then he told me that the contract is the contract, and that I would not be employed on the 15th, and that if I felt strongly about it, I should get a lawyer. Get a lawyer. I want to explain why that sentence is not a suggestion. That sentence is a man telling you he has already done the arithmetic on your life. He knows what I earn, because he sets it. He knows I am 27 and renting. He knows there is no lawyer. He is not saying go and see a lawyer. He is saying, we both know how this ends, and I am going to be pleasant about it, and you are going to go home. And then he stood up, because it was 11 minutes, and he had somebody at 10. I want to tell you about the 11 minutes, because it took me 3 months to understand what I had actually been in. He never asked me a question. Think about that. If you fire somebody because it is not working out, you have to have some kind of conversation. Even a coward asks something. Even a bad manager says something like, you must have felt it too, or, is there anything you want to say? There is a shape to it, because he is a person, and I am a person, and we are in a room. Craig asked me nothing at all, not because he was cruel. He asked me nothing because there was nothing he needed to find out, and I did not notice at the time. I noticed that I felt strange, that something about it had been slippery, that it had gone by like a thing on rails. I did not understand what I was looking at. I sat in that car park for 40 minutes and I did not cry, and I could not work out why my hands were shaking about a meeting where nobody had raised their voice. And then I had 2 numbers, 90 days to file a claim. That is the deadline. 90 days, and after 90 days it does not matter one bit what happened to you. All that matters is that you were late. And 11 weeks of savings. Those two numbers ran side by side all through that spring, and they were not the same length, and every single day I spent trying to work out what had happened to me was a day I was not looking for work, and I want anybody who has never been fired to understand that. It is not a mystery you get to solve at your leisure. The rent does not pause while you look for the truth. So, my theories. The first one was performance. Obviously, it is not working out means you are not good enough. That is what those words mean. And so I went home, and I got out every review I had ever had. They were good. They were not just good. One of them says I was in the top 3 billers in the office 2 years running, and it is signed by Craig. And that should have been a relief, and it was not. It was the opposite. Because now I had a man firing his top 3 biller and telling him it was not working out, and there is no world in which that is a sentence about my work. And it does not even make business sense. That is the thing I could not get past, and it is the thing that kept the whole mystery alive for 3 months. Forget me for a second, and look at it as a man who owns a business. He has just fired the person who made him the biggest fee in 4 years. To save 40,000 once, when that same person, on that same desk, with that same book of clients, would have made him 3 or 4 times that every year, for as long as she stayed. That is not greed. Greed would have kept me. Greed would have kept me, and paid me, and squeezed me for another decade. A greedy man does not fire his best earner over one commission. That is like burning your house down to avoid a parking ticket. So it could not be the money. That is what I decided. It could not be about the money, because the money did not add up, and so it had to be personal. It had to be something I did. And off I went for another 2 months in completely the wrong direction, because I had assumed that the man was rational. He was rational. I just could not see the shape he was being rational about. 81 days. The second theory was an incident, something I did, and I went back through my last month at that place hour by hour, and I want to tell you what that does to a person, because it is a specific kind of madness. You start remembering everything, every time you were short with somebody, every joke. A thing you said in a meeting in February that got a strange laugh. I lay awake replaying a 2-second exchange by the printer with a woman from accounts. There was nothing. There was genuinely nothing, and by the end of it I could not tell anymore. Because when you look at your own behavior that hard for that long, everything starts to look like evidence. 68 days. Then I decided it was Priya. Priya sat next to me for 2 years. Priya is the only person from that building I still speak to now, and I nearly destroyed it, and this is the part of the story I am most ashamed of. Because I got it into my head that somebody must have said something. Somebody must have gone to Craig. And the arithmetic of 3 in the morning said, well, who was closest to you? Who knew the most? Who had the most to gain from your desk being empty? And I sent her a message at 1 in the morning, which is the first thing you should know about it. Nobody has ever sent a good message at 1 in the morning. I did not accuse her outright. It was worse than that. It was that careful sort of message that lets you pretend you did not say the thing you absolutely said, all built out of just wondering and no pressure, and I completely understand if, and every single clause of it was a small door I was leaving myself so that when she was hurt I could say that was not what I meant. I knew what I was doing. I want to be honest about that. I was not confused. I sat there and I built that message like a machine, and I sent it, and then I watched the 2 ticks go blue at 1 in the morning, which meant she was awake too. She rang me about 4 minutes later. She did not shout at me. She just said, Tess. That is all she said, my own name, in that voice. And I sat on the end of my bed at 27 years old and understood that I had just done to my friend exactly what Craig had done to me, which is decide that a person is a problem without ever asking them a question. That is what I want people to understand about being treated like that. It does not stay in you. It comes out sideways at the nearest available person, and it will always be the person who is closest, because they are the only one in range. He did it to me in 11 minutes on a Thursday, and I did it to Priya at 1 in the morning about 6 weeks later, for free, without him ever having to lift a finger. We are all right now. Mostly. But there is a thing in it that was not there before, and I put it there, and that is mine. 52 days. And then I got to the bottom of it, and I want to talk about this properly, because I think it is the most important thing I am going to say tonight. There was a week in May where I decided that I was bad at my job. I want to describe how that thought actually works, because from the outside it sounds ridiculous. Top 3 biller, signed reviews, biggest placement in 4 years. But it goes like this. If it was not performance, and it was not an incident, and it was not a person, then there is only one door left, and the door is that it was always me. And so the reviews start to look different. Because what if they were kind? What if Craig writes nice things because it is easier than a conversation, and everybody in that office knew I was carried, and the big placement was luck, it was one candidate who happened to fit, an actual professional would have done that in a month, and every single person who ever said I was good at this was managing me. 11 weeks of savings became 4. I sent out 61 applications in 9 days and got 4 replies, and every rejection went into the pile as more evidence, because of course they do not want me. They can see it. They can all see the thing Craig saw, and I am the only person on earth who cannot see it. I did not get out of bed for 2 days. I want to say that plainly, because I think somebody listening has had those 2 days, and nobody ever describes them properly, so let me. It is not sadness. I was not lying there crying. It is much more boring than that, and much worse. It is that every single thing you would do to get out of it requires you to believe you are worth doing it for, and that is the one thing that has gone. So you cannot apply for a job because they will see it. You cannot ring a friend because they are being kind to you, and you now know what kindness is worth. You cannot even wash, because who for? And the sentence that ran on a loop for those 2 days was not "I am a failure." It was more specific than that, and much crueler. It was, everybody knew. Everybody knew. The whole floor knew. All 14 of them, they all knew. They clapped for me in February, and they all knew. And I was the only person in the building who thought I was any good, and there is a particular kind of hot shame in that which I would not wish on anybody. It is not the failing, it is the imagining that they were all being nice. And I want to tell you exactly what got me up, because it was not a friend, and it was not a podcast, and it was not me finding my inner strength, it was the 11 minutes. Because I was lying there rotating the whole thing for the 400th time, and I got to the meeting again, and I heard it again, and this time the thing that snagged was not what he said. It was how good he was at it. That man fired me in 11 minutes without one wasted word. There was a printed letter face down on the desk before I walked in. My final figure was calculated to the penny, including holiday, which takes payroll 2 days, which means that letter was made on the Tuesday, which means he decided before the weekend, and then said good morning to me for 3 days. And he never asked me a question, and he did not fumble, and he was not embarrassed, and he did not do the throat-clearing thing men do. And when I said the word commission, he had the answer already loaded, and his face did sympathy while his mouth did the contract. That is not a man having a horrible conversation. That is a man doing a thing he is good at. You do not get good at a thing you have done once. Nobody is fluent the first time. I have watched 100 managers deliver bad news and they are all clumsy, every single one, because it is a horrible thing to do, and their body knows it. Craig was not clumsy. Craig was smooth. Craig was so smooth that I sat in a car park for 40 minutes afterward, unable to work out what had happened to me. And that is not a coincidence, that is craft. So I got up off that bed, and I stopped asking why did he fire me. And I asked how many times has he done this? 40 days. And here is where I have to tell you about my job again. I read work histories. That is what I do all day. 40,000 of them. And I can look at a person's dates and tell you the story of their life. And I sat there in my flat with my laptop and I thought, a company has a work history too. Nobody ever thinks of it that way, because we all look at companies from the front. We look at the website and the values and the photograph of the team. Nobody reads the dates, but it is all there. Every person who has ever worked at that firm has a profile, and every profile has a start month and an end month, and they have all been sitting there in public the entire time, and I place people for a living, and I have never once in my life thought to read a company the way I read a candidate. It took me 6 hours. I want to tell you about those 6 hours, because it was the first time since March that I had been any good at anything, and I had forgotten what it felt like. I found every single person who has worked at that firm in the last 6 years. And I did not just take the obvious ones, because the obvious ones are never the whole picture. That is the first thing you learn. People leave places badly, and then they file the place off themselves like a serial number. So I went sideways. I went through connections. I went through the firm's own posts going back 6 years, and I read the comments, because when somebody leaves there is always a leaving post, and there are always 3 people underneath it saying good luck. I went through tagged photographs from Christmas parties, and I zoomed in on name badges. I found a woman who had scrubbed that firm off her profile completely. No dates, no mention. 6 years of her working life just missing. And I only got her because she was standing at the back of a photograph from a Christmas party in 2021, holding a paper crown, and I recognized the wallpaper. 6 hours. And I was not sad for one single second of it. I was working. My hands were warm. That is the thing nobody tells you about the far side of the 2 days in bed. What gets you out is not feeling better. It is having something you are actually good at to point at something. And then I put them all in a spreadsheet with 2 columns. Start, end. And I sat back and I looked at it and I could not breathe. 19 people. 19 people in 6 years. And I am not counting Craig. And I am not counting his brother-in-law who does the accounts. And I am not counting the 2 men who have been there since the beginning and who are still there now. 19 people. And the average time they lasted was 22 months. Not one of them made it to 24. Not one. 19 people, 6 years, and every single one of them was gone before their 2nd anniversary, and I had been the 19th, and I had walked in there with a coffee thinking it was a catch-up. It was not personal. That is what I had wrong for 3 months. I kept asking, why me? Why me? What did I do? And there was no me. There was never a me. I was not fired. I was harvested. It is a rotation. You hire somebody young and hungry, you let them build a book for 2 years, you take the fee on the big one, and then you dismiss them 1 quarter before the money lands, and you tell them to get a lawyer, and then you hire the next one, and the desk does not even get cold. And that is why he never asked me a question in that meeting. Because there was nothing to find out. He had not made a decision about me, he was not weighing me up. My name was on a list with a date next to it, and the date arrived, and a man who is very good at this walked into a room and did 11 minutes of a thing he has done 19 times. I was not even a person in that room, I was a scheduled task. So now you know why I was fired. I was not really. Nobody looked at Tess and decided anything about Tess. I hit 22 months, which is the number, and the number is the number for everybody. And a man who has run that same 11 minutes 19 times in 6 years turned a letter over on a desk and told me to get a lawyer, and then had somebody else at 10. And now you know why he never asked me a question. It is because a question is what you ask when you want to know something, and he already had everything he needed, which was a date. Here is what happened after. I did not get my 40,000. I want to say that early because I am not going to sell you an ending that did not happen. I never saw a penny of it, and I am not going to. The clause is real, the contract is real, and I was not employed on the 15th of April, and every lawyer I could get 10 free minutes from told me the same thing in the same tired voice. What I did instead was write to all 19 of them. It took me 2 weeks. 19 messages, and I made every single one different, because I have spent my career learning that a message that could have been sent to anybody gets read by nobody. I did not accuse Craig of anything. I did not use the word lawyer. I asked each of them one question, which was whether they would mind telling me how their time at the firm ended. 7 of them answered, and I want to tell you what 7 strangers said to me, because I have not been the same since. Every single one of them said a version of the same sentence. They said, I thought it was just me. 7 people, a woman who is now a teacher because she came out of that building, convinced she could not do this job. A man who told me he did not work for 14 months afterward. A woman who wrote 3 paragraphs and the 3rd one was an apology to me for not warning me because she had thought about it and decided she was probably being bitter and did not want to be that person. 7 separate people in 7 separate flats over 6 years, each of them alone, each of them lying awake doing exactly the maths I did, and every single one of them arrived at the same answer. It must be me. And the 12 who did not reply. I think about them more than the 7, because I know exactly why they did not reply. It is not that they did not see it. It is that a message from a stranger asking how your job ended, 4 years later, is a message asking you to open a door that you have spent 4 years getting to close, and you are not going to open it for a woman you have never met. So they are still out there. 12 people, right now, tonight, still holding it, still assuming. And I cannot do one single thing about that, and it is the part of this that I have not made my peace with. It must be me. 7 out of 7. Not one of them said, I think he did it on purpose. Not one of them said, I always wondered. 7 for 7, the same 4 words, from people who have never met each other. That is not a coincidence. That is a manufactured product with 100% success rate. That is the product. I want you to understand that. The money is not the product. The isolation is the product. He does not just take your commission. He takes it in a way that makes you go home and quietly agree with him, and then you never say anything. Because who would you say it to? And what would you even say? That is not a side effect of the design. That is the design. 19 people carrying the same secret in 19 separate rooms, all of them ashamed, none of them speaking, for 6 years. 3 of them are doing something about it now, together, with a proper lawyer, on a no-win, no-fee, because one person with a story is a grievance, and 3 people with the same story is a pattern, and a pattern is a completely different animal in a room like that. I am not part of it. My 90 days went by while I was in bed, and while I was writing to strangers, and while I was building a spreadsheet at 2 in the morning, and by the time I had the answer, the door I needed it for had been shut for 11 days. 11 days. I want you to sit with that, because it is the cruelest arithmetic in this whole story. The clock does not start when you understand what happened to you. It starts when it happens. So the exact thing that stops you understanding, the 2 days in bed, the 61 applications, the man in your head telling you it was your fault, all of that is not an obstacle to the deadline. It is part of the mechanism. He does not need the clause to be unbeatable. He only needs you to be too flattened to move for 90 days, and a person who has just been told they are not good enough by somebody they trusted will do 90 days standing on their head. So I gave them everything I had, my spreadsheet and my dates, and my 2 columns, and I got nothing out of it, and I never will. I would do it again tomorrow, because I did not fix anything, and I did not get paid, and Craig is still up over that carpet showroom right now, being lovely, remembering somebody's mum's name. But there are 7 people who used to think they were bad at their jobs and do not think that anymore. That is what I got. That is all of it. And I have decided it is enough, because I know exactly what those 2 days in bed felt like, and I have taken that away from 7 people, and there is a woman sitting at my old desk right now who is at about month 9, and she is going to get a message from a stranger in about a year, and she is going to think it is spam, and then she is not. Here is what I want to leave you with, because I think somebody listening tonight is doing the maths on themselves at 3 in the morning. When something is done to you, you will look for the reason inside yourself. Everybody does it. It is not weakness, it is the opposite. It is your brain trying to find the lever, because if it was something you did, then it is something you can change, and the world is still a place that makes sense. But some things that happen to you are not about you at all. Some things are a machine. And when a machine runs over you, the very worst thing you can do is spend 3 months looking for the thing about you that made it choose you, because it did not choose you. It has never chosen anybody. It just runs, and you were standing there. And here is the tell, and this is the only practical thing I have to give you, so take it. Watch for fluency. If somebody does a terrible thing to you and they are smooth while they do it, if there is no fumble in it, if the paperwork is already printed, if they have the answer ready before you have finished the question, if it is over in 11 minutes and you cannot work out afterward what hit you, then you are not the first. You are not even the 10th. Nobody is good at doing a bad thing the first time. Fluency is a rehearsal you were not present for, and if you are not the first, then there are others out there right now, in their own rooms, and every single one of them believes it was just them. Go and find them. That is it. That is the whole thing. You may not get your money, and you may not get an apology, and the man may still be up there over the carpet showroom, but you can go and find the other people, and you can tell them the 4 words that nobody ever told me, which are, it was not you. So tell me in the comments, have you ever gone home and decided that something was your fault, and found out years later that it was not? I read every single one of them, and I think the people who gather here understand each other in a way that most people never will. If this story touched your heart, I have another one waiting for you. Click the next video on your screen for another unforgettable story about courage, family, and the quiet strength of ordinary people. Subscribe to the Quiet Reckoning Stories, so you never miss one. I see you. You are stronger than they know, and I will be right here.